However, if we're looking at a win total, yes, is minus 135 to going over 10. And I like that bet. And I also think there is value on the Chargers to win the Super Bowl at 16-1. I believe this is going to be a great value bet, and it's already started to shorten. The problem is they play in such a difficult division when you talk about the AFC West. Last year, it was the NFC West, which we thought this is going to be the most difficult division in all of football. Here, I think it's the AFC West. So that's the real problem because all of these teams are talented. Even the Raiders at the bottom of the division at plus 650 are a good football team, made the playoffs last year. So that's the one area that makes me nervous, and also the fact that the Chargers have had problems closing out games. But I do think there are certain numbers that are favorable to me.
Jenks, we've been doing the show for a year, and you are 1-0 in predicting Super Bowl champions. And I do think there's some parallels between the LA Rams winning the Super Bowl last year and the Chargers being in the mix this year. Because last year, the argument against the Rams was, well, they play in a really difficult division. They play with the Niners. The Cardinals are supposed to be good as well. We know the Seahawks aren't really that great, but still, it was a difficult division to come out of. And what did the Rams do? They went out and won the Super Bowl. They had a new quarterback with Matt Stafford who had questions about winning big-time games and performing under the clutch because for so long he was in Detroit where it wasn't really the clutch factor that was tested. And you could kind of say that about Justin Herbert, where the Chargers have lost so many close games. The phrase is the Chargers gonna charger at end of games, and you don't have any faith in this team to close out games. Some of it's on the head coach and Brandon Staley not making the right decisions. I'm not sure if you can pin any of this on Justin Herbert, but I just keep seeing all these similarities between the Rams last year and the Chargers this year. A Chargers team that also went out and got a lot better defensively, especially getting Khalil Mack. They have Derwin James, who hopefully is healthy this season, one of the best corners in the game. Also got, I just blanked on his name, the guy from the Patriots that went, J.C. Jackson.
J.C. Jackson,
University of Florida. So it's a team that added a ton of pieces on their defense. Do you think this team is following in a similar path as the Rams last season?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's a good comparison to make. And here's what I would say when it comes to the AFC, because I don't want to sound like a guy who's talking out of both sides of his mouth. I think this is the Bills' year. If you're asking me who I think is going to win the Super Bowl, I believe this is the year for the Buffalo Bills. However, they are the favorites to win the Super Bowl. So you're not getting nearly the value that you would like to get. I am certainly not the only one who thinks Buffalo has the best chance to win it all. The books think that as well. But as a value play, I do believe the Chargers are the best value play on the board at 16-1. And I think they are following that blueprint where they have a ton of offense. We know that. They have one of the best 1-2 punches in the league at receiver in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. So defensively, and they ranked 22nd in the NFL last year in total defense, they needed some help, and they went out and got it. They signed J.C. Jackson. You mentioned Khalil Mack. And then quietly, they added two players on their defensive line, Sebastian Joseph Day from the Rams, who was part of a great defense last year, Austin Johnson from the Giants. So now they have solidified themselves quietly on the defensive line. And those aren't signings we hear about, but they are going to be better. And I think when you take a look at the guys they have added, that's what they needed. The Rams last year needed a quarterback. Well, the Chargers already had that. Or the Rams, the Chargers have a quarterback in Justin Herbert. What they needed was help defensively, and they went out and got that. So I think you're talking about two teams that were close and went out and got the pieces that they needed to sort of complete the puzzle, if you will.
Right. And the question mark was, well, can they win the big one? Because that was the question with Matt Stafford. And it's still kind of the question mark I have with Justin Herbert and that coaching staff, because that plays a factor as well. We make this point with Mike McCarthy all the time. So I'm not sure if it plays this year, if we see a little bit more out of Brandon Staley. Looking at the schedule for the Chargers, the first few games of the season, I think we'll know if the Chargers are for real. They start versus Las Vegas, then they go to Kansas City, which I will say the Chargers normally play Kansas City pretty closely. Then they host Jacksonville, and then they get Houston, Cleveland, Denver, and Seattle before the bye week. Because a lot of times when you're looking at futures, I think it's good to look at the schedule and see, is this team going to start off hot? So at least maybe if you don't believe them in for the full season, you can hedge out of these plays and maybe these odds will go up. So Jinx, looking at their schedule, do you think the best time is now to buy on the Chargers before the season starts? Or do you think you wait a few games and see, well, maybe if they lose the first 2 games of the season, you'll get an even
Yeah.
better number? Or do you think we'll see Justin Herbert just, lighting up the scoreboard from game one?
I think they'll go 1-1 to start the season because it's Raiders Chiefs. And look, if they go 2-0, then you're not going to get any more value. I don't think they go 0-2. I think worst case scenario, they go 1-1. But my issue with waiting, Chelsea, is that we've already seen these odds short, particularly for the Super Bowl. I think it was a month ago. I saw someone, and this is a sharp better, get them at 25-1. Maybe they shopped around to get that number, and I thought, man, that is a lot of value. And since then, we've seen money come in on the Chargers. So I'm afraid that if you wait any longer, and of course, the closer we get to the season, we're going to see more money come in as people start really getting into football and football futures. We could see less value than you're getting right now. And I don't believe you're taking a real roll of the dice if you think maybe they start 0-2, maybe I get better value, particularly because it's a 17-game season. So if you like them, I would do it now.
Do you think the better value play is still on the Chargers to win the Super Bowl, or do you think Justin Herbert to win MVP, which the odds are actually shorter, I believe, for Justin Herbert to win MVP? But looking at his stats, even last year, as a guy that's still a relatively new quarterback in this league, he was second behind only Tom Brady in pass yards, had 38 touchdowns. He did have 15 interceptions. But I think the question is, do we think Aaron Rodgers or somebody repeats that massive performance that we saw last year where he had 37 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions? That is such a great season that I'm wondering if any quarterback can put up that good of numbers. So I think it's very much in play that Justin Herbert wins an MVP. Do you think this is a better bet than the Chargers to win the Super Bowl?
I don't, just because of the value that you get on the Chargers winning the Super Bowl. And also look at the guys ahead of Justin Herbert here. Josh Allen, he's your favorite. We both love Josh Allen. We're going to talk about that bet for what? Since he was at Wyoming? I don't know, forever. Tom Brady is at 8-1. And Tom Brady, by the way, the Bucs have a pretty easy schedule this year. I think the 7th easiest schedule in the NFL, and they play in a really weak division. You've got Patrick Mahomes there, who, again, I think the Chiefs and Pat are a little overvalued. But if I'm looking for value, I would go back to that Super Bowl bet. And also, with the win total set at 10, yes is juice to -135. That's not a lot of juice to lay for a team that I absolutely think, even if they don't win the division, can make the playoffs. So I like that bet quite a bit as well.
Looking at some of the other season-long props for the Chargers, I think an interesting one is Justin Herbert total pass yards over under 46.99.5. If you look at last year, he got this number pretty easily, had 5,014 pass yards. If you expect another big year from Justin Herbert, I think this is probably the play to make. The touchdowns can be a little hit or miss just because they do have a good run game in Austin Eckler. So maybe some of the touchdowns are taken away in that regard. But I still think it's an offense that's going to throw the ball quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe, maybe I guess the thought is if their defense was not as good last year, then they're keeping opposing offenses on the field and making games more of a shootout. So Justin Herbert would have to pass the ball more. But by the same token, you can have a better defense getting opposing offenses off the field and get Justin Herbert on the field more. So, yeah, I think this is a really short number. I like that bet quite a bit. Touchdown passes is different. But for passing yardage, you're talking about a guy who has the most passing yards in his first 2 seasons in NFL history. And so I'm really surprised that this number is as low as it is. I feel like he should be able to hit this pretty easily.
I think so too. It makes me a little nervous that this number is much lower than last season because also looking at the division, if you think this division is going to be as good as the odds suggest, I think you will have to throw the ball quite a bit to keep up with the high-powered offenses that will be the Chiefs, the Raiders that now have Devontae Adams, and even the Broncos, who were a pedestrian offense last season. Now they have Russell Wilson. So I think when you're looking at AFC West games, some of these might be shootouts despite, having some of the better defenses on paper just because the quarterbacks are so good.
I think that's a really good point, and particularly in this division, it's just one solid quarterback after another. When the worst quarterback in your division is Derek Carr, that's a hell of a division, and that's a great division full of quarterbacks because Derek Carr, You can say what you want to about him. He's definitely an above average quarterback, had a career season last year, and now he's going to have Devontae Adams. So I think that's a really good point that you make, that we might see a few shootouts despite these defenses, just because, A, we know it's a quarterback heavy league. This is an offense for every single team in this division that wants to pass the ball. Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
And also Justin Herbert, I think the most drool worthy about him, besides maybe his hair and his height, and before I go on that tangent, but the way he gets the ball down the field. Free Justin Herbert. Let him throw the ball down the field, because nobody's passes are prettier than Justin Herbert's. When he lets that ball go down the field, my goodness, I can already imagine football right now. It's making me really happy.